Picture this. It's late. The office is pretty much empty, it's quiet, and there's just that one person, maybe it's you, with the glow of a laptop on their face, just putting in those extra hours, getting the details just right. Have you ever been that person? Have you ever had that feeling where you know you're working incredibly hard, but for some reason, it feels like nobody's really noticing? You know, after more than 25 years in leadership positions, I've sat in the rooms where the decisions are made about who gets promoted, who gets that next big opportunity. And I've seen, time and time again, why really good, hard work can just fly under the radar. So today we're going to talk about that. We're going to get into how you can strategically, and I mean strategically, increase your visibility without ever having to feel like you're playing politics. Okay, so first things first. Let's just acknowledge a feeling that I think a lot of us have, especially if you're a high performer. It's that quiet frustration of feeling invisible at work. And let me tell you, it's a silent career killer. You know, we're kind of raised on this idea, this simple equation. If I do great work, if I put in the effort, I'll automatically get great recognition. It makes sense, right? So we put our heads down, we grind, we deliver excellent work, and then we wait. But what if that whole equation is flawed? What if the leaders, who are buried in their own meetings and their own priorities, simply don't have the time or the line of sight to see your effort? Or, and this is the tough part, what if they only see the effort of the people who have gotten really good at making it known?
When that happens, it kicks off this really predictable and pretty damaging cycle. At first, it's just confusion. You're thinking, wait a minute, I'm doing everything they ask for. Why am I being passed over? Then that confusion starts to turn into frustration. And over time, if nothing changes, that can curdle into real demotivation. You start asking yourself, why am I even going the extra mile? Does it even make a difference? That emotional toll is very real, and frankly, it's exhausting. So the big takeaway here isn't that you need to work even harder. The problem isn't the quality of what you're doing, it's the communication of its value.
And that brings us to what I think is the most common mistake, the most common misdiagnosis I see professionals make. We think our leaders should see and value our hard work, our effort, but what they're really truly looking for is something else entirely.
Let's just look at this for a second. On the left, you've got effort. That's the hours you log, the tasks you complete, that feeling of being busy. It's all the stuff you do. But over on the right, you have impact. These are the problems you solve, the value you create, the business outcomes you influence. It's what changes because of the work you did. I remember I had two people on my team once. One of them would send me an update that said, I finished all 15 of my assigned tickets this week. Okay, that's effort. The other would write, I fixed that system glitch that was causing headaches for our top 10 clients. That's impact. Now, which one of those do you think stuck in my mind when it came time for performance reviews?
This right here is the fundamental truth of how careers move forward. From a leadership point of view, the real currency of advancement isn't how busy you are, it's the measurable results, the problems you make go away. Your busyness, well, that's your concern. Your impact, that's the organization's concern. So the goal has to shift. It's not about showing everyone how hard you're working anymore, it's about learning how to articulate your impact.
So, the big question is, how do you actually make that shift? Well, it means you've got to move away from just passively hoping someone will notice you and toward an active strategy for making your value known. And I want to be really clear here. This is not about bragging or playing office politics. This is a core professional skill. I call it the art of surfacing. And it's really just 3 simple parts. First step, and it's non-negotiable, is you have to document. And I don't mean making a list of your tasks, I mean your accomplishments. Just take 5 minutes at the end of every single week and write down the answers to these questions. What problem did I help solve? What progress did I make possible? What value did I add? This becomes your private record of your impact.
The second step is to translate. You look at that list you've documented and you translate it from your speak into business speak. So for example, I fixed a software bug becomes I restored critical functionality for the sales team which prevented a potential drop in revenue. See the difference? You're connecting your action to a meaningful business outcome. And the final step, of course, is to deliver. This just means finding those natural, low-friction moments like in a team update email or in your one-on-one with your manager to share that translated impact. It's not about boasting, it's about reporting. It's a matter-of-fact update on the value you've been creating. So remember, this whole thing is a 3-part process. Document, translate, and deliver. The real work of visibility starts long before you ever open your mouth in a big meeting. All right, let's make this really practical. I'm going to give you 3 simple, and I promise non-political rituals you can start using to surface your value on a consistent basis. Okay, let's break these down. First up is what I call the weekly impact summary. Super simple. It's just a short, bulleted email to your manager at the end of the week with your top 2 or 3 impacts. Not tasks, impacts. The second one is the project PS. When you finish a project, just add a little postscript, a PS, to a project email that frames the final outcome in terms of its business value. And third, the strategic question. In your next team meeting, try to ask a question that shows you're thinking bigger, connecting your work to a larger company goal. Now look, you don't need to do all 3 of these at once. Just pick one. Try it for a month. Consistency here is so much more important than volume.
And these little rituals, they're not just about getting noticed for your next review. They're about something much bigger. They're about building your reputation over time. This is what it means to play the long game in your career. This is the end goal. This is what we're really aiming for. It's not about any single promotion or one project. It's about building a career narrative, a story. Over time, you stop being known as the person who's just busy, and you start being seen as the person who solves important problems. You become a strategic asset. That's the person whose name comes up in those decision-making rooms. Just let that sink in for a second. All of the hard work, all of those late nights, they only really start to count toward your advancement when their value is perceived by the right people. And the responsibility for making sure that perception happens, well, it doesn't rest with your manager. It rests with you. So I'll leave you with this to think about. What's one small step, just one thing, you can do this week to start translating your effort into perceived value?
You know the scene. It's what, 7 p.m.? The office is finally quiet, and you're still there at your desk putting the final touches on a really critical project. And the work, it's good, it's excellent, you know it is. But you also feel that familiar mix of pride and, let's be honest, quiet frustration. You're thinking, this level of work, this quality, it has to be enough. It should just speak for itself. You know, over my career leading teams, I've seen this exact scenario play out more times than I can count. And what I've noticed is that it really boils down to 2 types of professionals. On one hand, you've got the silent worker. You know the type. Head down, totally focused, doing absolutely exceptional work, and really believing that the results, they'll be obvious to everyone. And then you've got the communicator. They're also doing great work, no question. But the difference is they're strategically sharing context, they're giving updates on progress, they're sharing insights as they go. Now, both of these people are incredibly valuable, but only one of them, only one, consistently gets the recognition they deserve.
And right there, that's where we find a fundamental misunderstanding of how companies, how organizations actually work. The silent worker, they're operating on this principle that good work, high-quality work, should just be self-evident. But the effective communicator, they understand a much harder truth. And that is in any complex organization, progress isn't just about doing the work. It's about making sure that work is seen, that it's understood, and crucially, that it's aligned with the bigger picture.
I have a tremendous amount of empathy for this feeling. I really do. It comes from a good place, a place of integrity, of humility. It's this belief that substance ought to matter more than style. And look, in a perfect world, it absolutely would be enough, but corporations aren't perfect meritocracies. They're complex human systems.
This idea, this hope that our good work will do the talking for us, is one of the most common and frankly most career-limiting myths I've seen professionals fall into. It's a noble idea, for sure, rooted in this desire for things to be fair. But it's a myth that can keep truly exceptional people from ever being fully seen.
So let's just be honest with ourselves for a second. In an environment where everyone is overloaded with information, where your boss has 10 other people to manage and their own pressures to deal with, does your work, just sitting there in its silent excellence, truly speak for itself? Or is it more likely that it isn't speaking at all? The thing is, silence is rarely interpreted as quiet competence. It's usually misinterpreted as something else. A lack of communication? Well, that can look like a lack of progress. Working away in your own corner? That can come across as being disconnected from the team's goals. And holding back on sharing your work? That can easily be mistaken for a lack of confidence in it. This isn't because leaders are unfair, it's just a matter of reality. They don't have time to be detectives to go digging for hidden effort. They have to act on the information that's put in front of them.
I mean, really try to put yourself in their shoes. They are drowning in emails, reports, meetings, a constant flood of data. They aren't trying to ignore your hard work. They simply can't see what isn't made visible. Their attention is probably their most scarce resource, so it's naturally going to flow toward the clearest, most obvious signals. Your job, then, is to make sure your value is one of those signals.
And this brings us to probably the most important mindset shift you can make in your professional life. We have to stop focusing only on our own internal feeling of effort and start thinking strategically about the external evidence of our value. We have to learn to speak the language of signals.
I really want you to let this sink in, because this is the whole game. Leaders don't see effort. They don't see the late nights. They don't see the brilliant problem you solved in your head on your commute. They see signals.
So what in the world is a signal? Well, it's not just a status update, and it's definitely not a long email listing every single thing you did. A signal is something much more refined. It's a concise, visible indicator that shows progress, demonstrates real impact, and connects your work back to what the organization actually cares about. Let me give you an analogy. Think of it like this. All your hard work, your effort, that's everything happening inside the factory. It's complicated, it's messy, it's absolutely essential. But your leaders, they're standing on the outside. They can't see any of that. The only thing they see is the finished product that rolls out the front door. That finished product, that is the signal.
Okay, so understanding this concept is one thing, but actually doing it is something else entirely. So let's shift from the what to the how. I want to give you a practical strategy for turning that silent work into powerful professional signals. And let me be very clear. This is a skill you can learn. It's not about changing your personality. It all comes down to a simple 3-step process. First, you've got to translate your activity into impact. So instead of saying, I spent the whole week analyzing sales data, you frame it like this. By analyzing the sales data, I found out our top region grew 15% last quarter. This tells us we should probably double down on that strategy. See the difference? One is about being busy, the other is about business results. Second, you want to share insights, not just updates. A list of completed tasks is just noise to a busy leader. An insight is a signal. So instead of saying, okay, tasks A, B, and C are done, you might say, while I was working on task B, I spotted a potential risk to our timeline that I think we need to talk about. That shows you're not just checking boxes, you're thinking 3 steps ahead. And third, and this is so important, always connect your work back to the bigger goal. Frame your signal so it's explicitly linked to a company objective. Something like, just wanted to let you know, my progress on the new onboarding module is directly supporting our department's goal to cut new hire ramp-up time by 20%. You're doing the strategic work for your leader, you're connecting the dots for them. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. That little voice in your head might be saying, this sounds like bragging, like self-promotion. I want you to challenge that thought and reframe it immediately. This is not about bragging. This is about stewardship. You are a steward of the company's resources. That includes your time, your talent, your salary. By making the value of your work visible, you are simply being a responsible steward of that investment. It's a core part of your professional duty.
So, I'll leave you with a simple, practical challenge. This week, forget about your to-do list for just a moment. I want you to think about what you've already accomplished. What is the one signal, one clear, concise indicator of impact that you can send to make the true value of your work finally visible?
Let's start with a scene I've witnessed countless times. It's late, probably 8 p.m. You're likely one of the last people in the office, again. The only light is from your screen as you put the final touches on a project you have poured your heart and soul into. You know the work is good. You know it's important. But as you're packing up to go home, this nagging thought just creeps in. You see other people, folks who seem to do less, who get the big projects, the promotions, and you can't help but wonder, does anyone even notice how hard I'm working? Have you ever had that feeling, that deep in your gut sense that your biggest contributions, the work that really takes it out of you, are just disappearing into a void? It's an incredibly frustrating and lonely place to be. And it's a feeling that I have seen over my entire career completely sideline some of the most talented and dedicated professionals I've ever met. This feeling, this pain, it's very real. And here's the thing, it almost never comes from a lack of effort. It comes from a fundamental gap. A gap between the work we do and how that work is seen. And closing that perception gap, well, that's what we're going to talk about. No, you're not imagining it. You hit your deadlines. The quality of your work is top-notch. By any traditional measure, you are a fantastic employee. And yet, you keep finding yourself on the outside looking in when those key decisions are made about who gets to take that next step up. It doesn't feel logical. In fact, it can feel downright unfair. So the big question is, why? Why does this keep happening? Is it just office politics? Is it some kind of favoritism? Well, sometimes, but I'll tell you, more often than not, the real answer is found when you start to understand the world your leader is actually living in. The solution isn't about working harder. It's about seeing things from the other side of the desk. So let's do that. Let's step into your leader's shoes for just a minute. You see, for many, many years, I was the one on the other side of that desk. And I can tell you that the day-to-day reality of that role is completely misunderstood. It's not a world of quiet observation. It's a world of constant triage. Let's just start with a number, 15. Imagine you have 15 direct reports. That's 15 different careers you're responsible for guiding. 15 different project streams you have to stay on top of. 15 unique individuals, all with their own challenges, their own needs. The mental bandwidth required to track every single task for every single person, honestly, it's just not possible. Now, let's add the daily flood of information. Seeing over 250 emails in a day, that's not an exaggeration for a lot of leaders. And every single one of those emails isn't just a message. It's a request. It's a problem that needs solving, a decision that needs to be made, a fire that has to be put out. It is a constant, relentless fight against being completely overloaded. And then there's the calendar. For many leaders, it's just a solid wall of back-to-back meetings. This is where their most valuable, most finite resource, their time, gets spent. The day is swallowed up, not by watching the work get done, but by making high-stakes decisions with whatever limited information manages to cut through all of that noise. So, what does all of this actually mean for you? It means your leader cannot, and I mean cannot, track your day-to-day activity. They don't have a list of your tasks. They don't have a scorecard of your hours. Instead, they have to rely on a much more efficient mental shortcut, pattern recognition. They are constantly, and often subconsciously, scanning for signals that tell them who's reliable, who's driving things forward, and frankly, who is making their incredibly difficult job just a little bit easier. And this brings us to the most important point of this entire conversation. If they're not tracking your hours or your task list, then what signals are they looking for? What are the real metrics of value from their perspective? You know, this is precisely where that gap we talked about comes from. On one side, you have what so many of us believe is valuable: the number of tasks we finish, the hours we put in, the raw effort we expend. But from a leader's point of view, from that world of triage, all of that is just noise. They have to ignore it. What they track are the signals, and those signals create three things: confidence, ownership, and clarity. These are the metrics that actually matter. Let's break these down. First up, confidence. This is the foundation of everything. It's your ability to give your leader back the one thing they have the least of: their mental energy. When they give you a project, can they genuinely walk away and not worry about it, knowing it will be handled without constant follow-up? That kind of trust, that peace of mind, it's absolutely priceless to a busy leader. Next is ownership. This goes a big step further. It's the huge difference between saying, "I did the task you asked me to do," and saying, "I am taking full responsibility for the success of this outcome." It means you're thinking 3 steps ahead. You're anticipating problems. You're driving toward the actual business result. You're not just a pair of hands to them. You're a strategic partner in the outcome. And finally, we have clarity. In that world of information overload we talked about, the person who can take a complex, messy problem and boil it down to a simple summary with a clear recommendation, that person becomes invaluable. You aren't adding to your leader's cognitive load. You are actively and powerfully reducing it. That is a signal that simply cannot be ignored. Okay, so now we understand what leaders are really tracking. The next logical step is, how do you actively demonstrate these things? How do you make your true value seen without feeling like you're just being loud or creating noise? There's a line that has always stuck with me. Visibility is not noise. It's clarity. Just let that sink in for a moment. So many people shy away from visibility because they think it means bragging or shameless self-promotion, but that's a fundamental misunderstanding of what real, effective visibility actually is. And here is the absolute key to remember. Effective visibility is never about you. It's about the information. It is an act of professional courtesy to your time-starved leader to make your progress, your challenges, and your wins easy for them to see and to understand. It's just about being an efficient, effective communicator. So how do we actually do this? Well, first, you frame your updates. Don't just say the report is done. Instead, say the Q3 report is finished, and the key takeaway that affects our team's revenue goal is X. See, you've immediately connected your task to the bigger picture. Second, use signal ownership. Don't just show up with a problem. Say, I've identified a potential risk with our deadline. I'm already looking at 2 possible solutions, and I'll have a clear recommendation for you by the end of the day. You're showing you own the outcome, not just the task. And third,
You do these things over and over. You do it consistently. And that is how you build unshakable confidence. You become known as the person who doesn't just deliver work, you deliver progress, you deliver solutions, and you deliver clarity. So you see, it was never about working harder. It's about communicating smarter. Your real value isn't measured in the effort you put in, but in the confidence, the ownership, and the clarity you create for others. So I'll leave you with a question to reflect on this week. What one signal, what one small change in how you frame an update or report a problem will you choose to send to demonstrate the incredible value you truly bring?
Let me paint a picture for you. It's a scene I've watched play out more times than I can count over a long career. You've just finished a really tough project. I mean, you poured yourself into it. The late nights, the complex problems, you got it done. And then you're in that debrief meeting, and you just watch as your part is glossed over. Or maybe worse, someone else's summary just completely flattens all the work you did. And you just sit there, silent. Because, saying something, it just feels wrong. And that feeling right there, that's what we need to talk about. It's not some big dramatic event. It's a quiet sting of frustration. It's that feeling that your best work is happening in a vacuum, that its real value just isn't seen. And over a career, believe me, that feeling doesn't just wear you down. It can actively stall your progress. So let me ask you, just straight up, does this sound familiar at all? Have you ever had that feeling where the gap between the quality of your work and the recognition it gets just feels way too big? Just think about that for a second. Now, the usual advice people get here is, oh, you've got to learn to play the game, or you need to get better at self-promotion. I've seen that advice for decades, and for most thoughtful professionals, it's a dead end. It just feels fake. The real fix, the one that builds real respect and influence, is to completely reframe what being visible even means.
This right here, this is the single most important idea to get your head around. I'm going to say it again. Visibility is contribution made visible. See, it's not about you. It's not about your personal brands or anything like that. It's about giving your good work the voice it deserves, giving it the context so that other people can actually understand its impact.
Let's really look at the difference here. The old way of thinking, self-promotion, that's all rooted in ego, right? It's basically saying, hey, look at me. But this new view, professional clarity, that's rooted in responsibility. It sounds more like, here's the value this work created, so we can all learn from it and move forward. You see the difference? One's about getting credit. The other is about creating understanding for everyone.
Okay, so how do we actually put this into practice? This isn't about memorizing some lines to drop in a meeting. It's about adopting a few simple communication habits that, honestly, the most effective leaders I know use all the time without even thinking about it. They're just practical, ethical ways to make your contributions clear.
These 4 habits are really the core of it all. First, speaking in outcomes, focusing on the result of what you did, not just the task itself. Second, sharing your progress in a way that actually informs your team. Third, asking really thoughtful questions that show you're engaged. And fourth, being the one to summarize the value for the group. The common thread here, as you can probably tell, is that every single one of these is centered on the work and its benefit to the team, not on you as an individual.
Now look, if you only take one thing away from this entire conversation, please let it be this one. Shifting how you talk from activity to outcome is hands down the most powerful change you can make in how you're perceived at work. It's the difference between being seen as someone who does tasks and being seen as someone who drives results. Let's make this crystal clear. Saying, I ran the analysis, okay, that describes what you did. It's an activity, a check mark on a to-do list. But saying something like, the analysis we ran showed us how to reduce project delay by 20%, now that describes the value you created. It answers the so what question before anyone even has to ask it. And this number just says it all, doesn't it? A number tells a story. 20% is real, it's tangible, it's a result that leadership gets immediately, that the business can actually feel. Suddenly, your work isn't just a task you completed, it's a measurable impact on the company's goals. That's what gets noticed.
Now at this point, I know exactly what many of you are thinking. I've been there. It's the biggest thing that holds people back when they try to do this. It's that fear, that little voice in your head that says, speaking this way, it's going to sound arrogant.
Is it bragging to just state a fact about the work, to put a number to its impact? This is the very question that keeps so many talented, hardworking people from getting the visibility they've earned. They end up silencing the voice of their own contributions because they're afraid of being seen as a braggart.
We need to call this what it really is. This is not self-promotion. This is clarity. And providing clarity on the results of your work isn't just some nice-to-have skill. It's a professional responsibility. You owe it to your team, to your leaders, to the whole organization to make the value of your efforts clear so everyone can make better decisions.
So this is the thought I want to leave you with. Clarity is not arrogance. It's an act of service. When you make your contribution visible in this way, you're not just helping your own career. You are helping your entire organization see what works, what creates real value, and where to put its energy next. And that right there is the real work of a leader.
Let me ask you something. Have you ever been there? You know, you're leaving the office late. You've poured everything you have into a project. But you've got this nagging feeling that the one person who really needed to see all that effort, well, they just didn't. It feels like your best work is happening in a room no one else is even looking into. It's a quiet kind of frustration, isn't it? And over a whole career, that quiet can get pretty deafening. You know, after decades working in these kinds of environments, I can tell you this is not a personal failure. Not at all. It's a structural problem we all run into. We end up working in what I call an echo chamber. Inside it, the quality of our work is obvious. To us, and maybe to our closest colleagues. But the sound just doesn't travel any further than that. So that really brings us to the central question we have to tackle, right? Why is it that truly valuable, really well-executed work so often fails to even register on the leadership radar? I mean, is it that they're just not looking, or is it something else? Something maybe a little closer to home?
The truth, and I've seen this play out time and time again, is that the answer usually lies within us. It's rooted in a very deep and, frankly, a very understandable professional fear. It's the fear of stepping into the spotlight.
And that fear is real, isn't it? On one side, you have what we think the risk is. We worry about appearing arrogant, we worry about being judged by our peers, and those are completely valid concerns. But then, let's look at the other side of this, the actual cost of staying quiet. The cost is professional invisibility. It's having the value you create completely misinterpreted, and ultimately, it's career stagnation. You see, the quiet risk of being invisible is so much greater than the loud risk of being seen. This brings us to a really critical shift in mindset. It's a shift that takes this entire issue out of the soft skills bucket and puts it right into the category of a core professional competency. It's all about understanding your role in a completely new light. Just let that idea sit for a moment. This is not about bragging. It's not about self-promotion. Think of it more like essential data transfer. You hold critical data on the value that's being created in your corner of the organization. It is your professional responsibility to make sure that data gets to the people who are making the strategic decisions. It's really a duty to your team, to the resources you've been given, and to the mission of the entire organization. So once you accept this as a responsibility, the next step becomes pretty clear. You have to take active ownership of your professional story, because really, you're the only one who can. Let me say that again. If you don't define your own value, someone else will define it for you. And let me tell you, they will probably do it with incomplete information, or with their own biases, or maybe based on just a single conversation they had. The vacuum created by your silence will get filled, and it will be filled with assumptions. And that is a price you just cannot afford to pay. Okay, so how do we actually do this? How do we move from this new way of thinking to a real, tangible outcome? How do we turn this idea of responsible visibility into recognized value and, well, meaningful career growth? It requires a framework. Now, this isn't just a to-do list. It's a strategic approach. First, you have to learn to articulate your impact, not just your activity. So instead of saying, I completed the report, you say, the analysis in my report identified a 10% cost-saving opportunity. See the difference? It's about the outcome. Second, communicate your progress. This doesn't have to be some big presentation. A simple 3-bullet point email to your manager at the end of the week, summarizing key results, that can be incredibly powerful. And third, and this is the most crucial part, connect what you're doing to the mission. Frame your updates within the context of the bigger company goals. You need to show how your work on Project X is directly supporting the organization's goal to, say, increase market share. And so that brings us right back to where we started, with a question. But this one's a bit more pointed. After everything we've talked about, who is telling your professional story right now? Is it you? Or is it the silence you're leaving behind? The choice and responsibility, well, that's yours.
Let me paint a picture for you.
You've just spent months, maybe even a year, pouring everything you have into a critical project. We're talking long nights, tough problems, real deep focus. And the project? It's a huge success. But then, as the team celebrates, you watch someone else present the work. And your name? Well, it's just a footnote. You feel that little sting, right? That frustration? But you tell yourself, it's fine. The work speaks for itself. But does it? After decades of seeing this play out, I can tell you that this is probably one of the most dangerous assumptions you can make in your career.
You know that feeling, that sense of being completely overlooked? It always leads to a question. A question that, honestly, most of us are afraid to even ask ourselves.
Just take a second and think about your own career. Have there been times when your best work, your most thoughtful contributions, just seem to disappear into thin air? If we're being really honest with ourselves, the answer is probably a quiet yes. Now, don't get me wrong. Great work is the table stakes. It is absolutely non-negotiable. But by itself, it's not enough.
See, the real problem isn't just one missed attaboy. The real danger is the compounding cost of being invisible over 5, 10, even 20 years. It's this quiet, strategic disadvantage that just builds and builds over time, usually in ways we don't even notice until it's way too late.
Let's be real about how these decisions actually get made. When leaders are in a room deciding who gets the promotion, they are looking for clear evidence of impact. If your work and your thought process are always invisible, you're basically asking them to take a blind bet on you. And in most organizations, leaders don't take blind bets. They invest. They invest in the people whose contributions they can see and they can talk about.
Okay, now let's talk about something even deeper. Trust. Trust isn't just about getting high-quality work in on time. It's about reliability. It's about predictability. When you communicate your progress, when you talk about your challenges and your wins, you're not bragging. What you're doing is building a public track record of reliability. You're making your process transparent. That lets people trust not just that you'll deliver, but how you'll deliver. Invisibility, on the other hand, well, it just breeds uncertainty. And all of this, it leads right here to leadership opportunities, the chance to lead a big team, a major project, a new department. These roles are given to people who are perceived as being ready. And that perception, it's built almost entirely on the visible evidence of your impact, your judgment, and your communication. Look, being the quiet, heads-down worker might feel safe, but it is a role that rarely gets an invitation to the leadership table.
So I know seeing all those costs laid out can be a little unsettling. The natural question is, okay, how do I fix this without turning into that guy, the shameless self-promoter? The key is to reframe your goal. Your objective isn't to be loud. Your objective is to be trusted. And you'll find that sustainable visibility is just the natural result of building your career on the right foundation. It really all comes down to 3 core pillars. First, foundational work. This is the bedrock. It's non-negotiable excellence in your craft. Second, clear communication. This is about strategically and consistently talking about your work, what's its purpose, how's it going, and what were the results, to the right people at the right time. And third, and this is crucial, all of it has to be grounded in unwavering ethics. Visibility without integrity is a bomb waiting to go off in your career. When you build on this foundation, making your work seen, well, it stops being self-promotion and starts being an act of professional responsibility.
So many of us are worried about the risk of being seen as arrogant. We play small, we downplay what we've done, because we just don't want to be that person. But I need you to understand this. You are trading a small, perceived social risk for a much, much larger and more tangible career risk. Let that sink in for a minute. Hiding your contributions is not humility. It's a strategic decision that actively holds back your growth, limits your impact, and damages your ability to contribute at your highest potential. It is a direct risk to your career, period.
So, if any of this is resonating with you, if you've ever felt that quiet frustration of being overlooked, the question really becomes, what do you do about it? And the answer doesn't have to be some grand, dramatic gesture. It's really just about a small, simple shift in your day-to-day approach.
Real change starts with a single, small step. This week, just this week, find one opportunity to proactively communicate the value of what you're working on. It could be a short, concise update to your manager, a helpful summary in a team chat, or even a quick 5-minute debrief on a call. One small act of intentional visibility. That's it. That's how this begins.
Just remember this. Waiting around to be noticed is not a strategy. It's hope. And a remarkable career isn't built on hope. Your impact, your work, It deserves to be seen. Make the choice to build your career on strategy.